Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Dr. Muhammad Sarfraz, Associate Professor of Medicine. Today we will discuss about cerebrovascular. So, as far as definition of CVA is concerned, it is the main points are it is acute or sudden in onset. The damage occur in CVA is irreversible. There is focal neurological deficit that lasts more than 24 hours, and it is of vascular in origin, and it is non-traumatic. So definition include it is acute, sudden, irreversible focal neurological deficit lasting for more than 24 hours and is of vascular in origin and non-traumatic. So there are basically four types of CVA: large vessel atherosclerosis, small vessel disease, for example lacunar infarcts, cardioembolic strokes, and cryptogenic strokes. Each minute of large vessel ischemic stroke, if untreated, close to 2 million neurons die. So time is very important in the management of stroke. The causes of stroke are multifactorial. The main pathological processes occur in stroke. These are atherothrombi or embolism. Embolism may come from the heart, or embolism may come from the carotid artery as well, from the dislodge of the thrombi in the cerebral vessels. Arteriosclerosis is another process in which the small vessel stroke occurs. Hyalinizations of the vessels occur due to chronic long-standing hypertension. Arteriosclerosis leads to decreased blood supply of the affected area, and ultimately hyalinizations of the end arteries occurs and lacunar infarct as a result form. Another pathological process that is the feature of stroke is hemorrhage. There may be vasculitis, myeloid angiopathy, in which the myeloid is a protein is deposited in the vessels. Thereby vessels become rigid and they cannot withstand the shear stress of the blood. Therefore, the rupture of the blood vessels leading into hemorrhagic stroke. Then structural abnormalities of the vessels. There are various vascular abnormalities like capillary telangiectasia, venous angioma, AV malformations, and aneurysms. So these are all the causes of hemorrhagic stroke. There are basically two types of stroke: infarctive stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. And myeloid angiopathy and structural vascular abnormality that I have mentioned, these are the causes of hemorrhagic stroke. And also hypertension is also a leading cause of hemorrhagic stroke as well. Then arterial dissections is another cause of stroke. It is particularly common in younger population. There are various risk factors that leading to these pathological processes that I mentioned. For example, diabetes, hypertension, various cardiac diseases, which are a source of embolism to the CNS. For example, cardiac arrhythmias, atrial myxoma, valvular heart disease, rheumatic heart disease. These are the causes of infective endocarditis and large anterior wall MI. These are predisposing factor of cardiac emboli formation and resultant stroke. Then physical inactivity, obesity, smoking, alcohol intake, these are also risk factors for developing stroke. Then various connective tissue disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, they cause vasculitis, CNS vasculitis, although rare, but can cause CNS vasculitis and leading to stroke, particularly in the younger population. Then vasculitis, various vasculitis, for example, polyarthritis nodosa, although rare, but can be considered as a cause of stroke in younger population. Then various bleeding and clotting disorders can cause stroke. For example, in ITP, if the platelet count is less than 5,000, it can cause hemorrhagic stroke. Similarly, clotting disorders, for example, mutant prothrombin 2, protein C and protein S deficiency, antithrombin 3 deficiency. These are the causes of infarctive stroke, particularly in the younger population. Similarly, hyperhomocystinemia can also cause infarctive stroke in younger population. The time is very important factor as far as stroke is concerned. History is an absolutely critical first step towards making a diagnosis. Obviously, history and clinical examinations is necessary to reach the diagnosis, and the salient features of stroke that it is of sudden onset of weakness or sudden onset of focal neurological deficit. We have to rule out CVA. As far as clinical features of concern, it depends upon the particular vessels which is involved and the area supplied by that vessels. For example, features of the middle cerebral artery stroke, there may be contralateral hemiparesis or hyposthesia. Weakness of the arm and face is worse than in the lower limb. Gaze towards to the side of lesions. Ipsilateral hemianopsia, receptive or expressive aphasia if dominant hemisphere is affected. Agnosia, difficulty to recognize the various things. Agnosia. Inattention and neglect. And features of anterior cerebral artery stroke, these include disinhibition, but speech is preserved in these patients, mental status is altered, judgment is impaired, contralateral cortical sensory deficit, contralateral weakness greater in legs than arms, urinary incontinence, and gait apraxia, difficulty in walking. Because judgment and gait and the micturition center found in the frontal lobe. The posterior cerebral artery stroke manifested by cortical blindness, contralateral homonymous hemianopsia, altered mental status, visual agnosia, difficulty to recognize various things, and memory impairment may. And vertebral and basilar artery stroke, that is posterior circulation stroke, patient may present with nystagmus, vertigo, diplopia, and visual field deficit, dysarthria, dysphagia, syncope, facial hyperesthesia, ataxia, and various cranial nerve abnormality. So these are all the clinical features, and as far as clinical examination is concerned, we have to do CNS complete examinations. Motor examination, sensory examination, autonomic examination, cerebellar examination, and cranial nerve examination should be done in every patient presented with sudden focal neurological deficit. Then various differential diagnosis should be bear in mind. For example, we should also exclude TIA. TIA is usually weakness, focal deficit less than 24 hours. Most of the time it is less than an hour. More than 90% of the TIA lasting less than an hour. But usually they may 10% of the TIA may prolong for more than 1 hour, but usually the weakness settled within 24 hours. So one of the competitive differential diagnosis is TIA in a patient presenting with sudden weakness or sudden focal deficit. Then obviously we have to rule out metabolic encephalopathies in these patients. For example, uremic encephalopathy, hepatic encephalopathy, hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia, and various electrolyte abnormalities, for example hyponatremia. We have to rule out metabolic encephalopathies as well. Then the third one, we have to rule out traumatic causes, because traumatic subdural hematoma, extradural hematoma, intracellular bleed can occur after trauma. So trauma should be ruled out, because in CVA it is non-traumatic. Then there may be confusional states, and there may be decreased memory, attention deficits without any limb weakness, because it depends upon the area supplied by that vessel. So if temporal lobe or frontal lobe is concerned, patient may present with various personality disorders. So we have to rule out other causes, for example, acute psychosis, schizophrenia, and we have to rule out temporal lobe epilepsy, drug withdrawal, alcohol intoxications. These are all the competitive differential diagnoses we have to rule out when we evaluate a patient of stroke. So as far as investigations are concerned, emergency CT without contrast is the first choice, because we have to rule out the hemorrhage and we have to decide whether we can go for fibrinolytic therapy, because the time period is for up to 4.5 hours we can give fibrinolytic therapy. So the first line of investigation is emergency CT scan without contrast to rule out hemorrhagic stroke. If there is in normal or there is infarction and the features of stroke are there, we have to go for fibrinolytic therapy. Then the next investigation is diffusion weighted MRI. Although it is superior than CT in diagnosis acute infarct, but because in this investigation time is consumed and also there is an issue of availability, not all the centers are equipped with diffusion weighted MRI, so it is not the first choice. Similarly, diffusion perfusion MRI, you see whenever there is a stroke, there is a decreased supply to a certain area, the area around that affected area is also ischemic, but the tissue is not dead, not infarcted, only there is ischemia. This tissue is called penumbra. This tissue can be saved with revascularization or by timely fibrinolytic therapy. So it can be judged on diffusion perfusion MRI, usually in a patient of stroke presented with more than 4.5 hours, to decide whether fibrinolytic therapy or revascularization in these patients can be done or not. Similarly, CT angiograph can be done in a patient with large vessel occlusion, in which we decide interventional thrombectomy. So CT angiogram should be done in those patients. CT perfusion studies are similar to the diffusion perfusion MRI to see the penumbra, tissue which is ischemic and can be saved by fibrinolytic therapy or interventional procedures in patient presenting after 4.5 hours. Similarly, carotid Doppler studies in order to see the carotid vessels narrowing. Similarly, echocardiography to rule out causes of cardioembolism, and obviously electrocardiography to rule out arrhythmias and to rule out various risk factors leading to stroke, for example, fasting lipid profile, renal profile, blood complete examinations, blood glucose level, because hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia both can deteriorate the stroke patient rapidly. Coagulation panel for rheumatoid factor, anti-nuclear antibodies, and markers of vasculitis, P-ANCA, C-ANCA, homocysteine level, particularly in the younger patient, because these are the causes commonly found in younger patient. Similarly, platelet count, PT and APTT level. This is also necessary to rule out the bleeding disorders and clotting disorders leading to stroke, and also these investigations are necessary because when we plan for fibrinolytic therapy to rule out the hemorrhagic tendency in the patient, then obviously other investigations regarding the various causes which I mentioned earlier. So as far as treatment and management is concerned, first of all we have to consider about airway, breathing, circulation. We have to maintain airway, breathing and circulation after stabilization of the patient. Next step is to assess if he or she is a candidate for alteplase therapy. Obviously, general care of the patient with acute stroke will include blood pressure monitoring and treatment as described, swallowing evaluations, aspiration prevention, IV fluid with isotonic fluids if patient is dehydrated, avoid and treat fever aggressively, treat hyperglycemia, prevent infections and DVT prophylaxis, and early evaluation plan for subsequent rehabilitation, for example, speech therapy and physiotherapy. So what are the criteria for thrombolytic therapy? Symptoms suggesting an ischemic stroke. There is no recent head trauma, no MI in the past 3 months, no GI bleed in past 21 days, no arterial puncture in past 7 days, no major surgery in the past 2 weeks, no history of an intracranial bleed, systolic blood pressure less than 185 mm mercury and diastolic blood pressure less than 111 mm mercury, no recent trauma or bleeding history, not on any oral anticoagulant, and blood glucose is more than 50 mg per deciliter and platelet count is more than 100,000. Regarding treatment of infarctive stroke, we have antiplatelet therapy, we have aspirin, clopidogrel, diphenhydramine, anticlodipine. We usually use aspirin alone, or if patient is allergic to the aspirin, clopidogrel can be given. If there are recurrent episodes of infarctive stroke, we have to give combination of aspirin and diphenhydramine. The combination of aspirin and clopidogrel is contraindicated because risk of increased hemorrhage. Anticlodipine is nowadays not used because risk of neutropenia is high. As far as anticoagulant therapy is concerned, there is a controversial results, and most of the trial and consensus of experts say that anticoagulant therapy is only necessary in certain conditions like the cardiac diseases with high potency of transverse embolism to the brain, and then symptomatic internal or carotid artery or vertebral arteries, extracranial and intracranial arteriosclerotic arteries with symptoms of evolving stroke or evolving TIA, then hypercoagulated states, and in all these we have to give our basilar artery occlusion. These are the states in which we have to give anticoagulant therapy, but the consensus is the first 24 to 48 hours no anticoagulation should be given even to the patient having these conditions. The anticoagulant therapy should be given between 3 to 14 days depending upon the infarct size, risk of hemorrhage and various other modalities. If the infarct size is small and there is no risk of hemorrhages, the anticoagulant therapy can be given earlier after 3 days. But if the infarct size is more and risk of hemorrhage is more and these 5 or 6 conditions are there, one can give anticoagulant after 14 days. And also the consensus is that no heparin or enoxaparin can be used as a bridge therapy. Another aspect is antihypertensive therapy, and there are certain target to treat. In case of infarctive stroke, the target to treat is 220 by 120 mm of mercury. In case of, if we have to give fibrinolytic therapy to the infarctive stroke, the target of blood pressure to treat is 185 over 111 mm of mercury. And in case of hemorrhagic stroke, the target to treat is 180 by 110 mm of mercury. The next is what drugs should be used. Ideally, short-acting drugs can be used. Esmolol can be given, metoprolol, nitroprusside can be given to these patients, and nitroglycerin patches can be used. Then the degree of decreased blood pressure should be low. There should not be rapid decrease of blood pressure because it can harm the neuronal tissues, because in brain due to infarction there is loss of autoregulation at the arteriolar level, depending upon the mean arterial pressure. So if we decrease blood pressure rapidly, it can damage the surviving neurons in the brain. So one have to reduce about 15 to 20% of mean arterial pressure in the first few hours. And in case of hemorrhage with raised ICP, which also require high cerebral perfusion pressure, one should not decrease the blood pressure below 160/100. If in case of hemorrhagic stroke without ICP, one can safely decrease the blood pressure up to 140/90 millimeter of mercury. Then various interventional therapies, mechanical thrombectomy, intraarterial thrombolysis, cerebral angioplasty, and bypass surgical procedures, and clipping of aneurysm usually done in case of subarachnoid hemorrhage. Thank you very much.